Spiritual is not just something we ought to be, it is something we are. We're getting into the heart of it here. This is where Dallas Willard, the philosopher, and Dallas Willard, the theologian, are one and the same person. And this here means that spiritual life is not something that you might have or might not have. Spiritual life is what you've had for a very long time. Ever since you have existed, you've had a spiritual life. So what I want you to do is at the top of this page here, where it says, what then is spiritual reality? Just right above that, personal reality. Hey everybody, welcome to the Sanctus Forum. I am Michael Stewart Robb, better known as Mike. Here on the Sanctus Forum, we are interested in books and everyday spirituality. We want to help you read better books, better. And we're reading Dallas Willard's The Divine Conspiracy. Get it, read it. We're in a section here called All Things Visible and Invisible. That is a section that's going to go on, at least for us, for 5 more videos, which, if you're looking ahead, means we're going to be reading this section into the Advent season, and then that will be it for Conspiracy Commentaries 2023. The first bit here is, what then is spiritual reality? That's what we're talking about today. And as I said already, this is the heart of it. This is a big deal for Dallas Willard. It's a really key move in his theology and philosophy as a whole. And if you don't get what he's doing here, then you probably won't get the whole thing. It's a big deal. Well, what he's going to say is he really wants to tell you about God. I've been talking about this whole chapter. He really wants to tell you about God, and he wants to talk about God as spirit. And now here's the thing. In order to talk about God as spirit, he has to talk about human beings as spirit, as having spiritual reality. And that is the main way in which he is going to get concepts which he can use for God. And he believes that God has made this way possible for us, that we are able to understand what he is like by looking at what we are like. What we are like is much closer to us. We can make sense of that, much more easily than just taking a look at God. But I want to acknowledge right at the beginning that this can be something that's very difficult for theologians to swallow. There's this idea that God is unique. He's so different from anything else that it's very hard to use, or impossible to use, anything else to make sense of who he is and what he is. Now, Dallas Willard isn't going to agree with that. It's just something that it's not how he's going to make sense of God's uniqueness, that there are no concepts that you could find in the realm of things outside of God that you could use to make sense of God himself. Now, there are so many things in this section here. I should just get on and start saying it, but really 5 things that he wants to say about what spirit is. And remember, he's mainly looking at us, and he's asking you to look especially at yourself. And that's really where you're going to get these ideas from, is by looking at yourself. So the first thing that he wants you to look at about yourself is that there are aspects of you that are non-physical. Meaning by that, you can't discover them, and you don't discover them through your 5 senses, through hearing, touching, tasting, etc. And the prime best example of that are your thoughts, or your wishes, your willings. You know what you're thinking about, you know what you want at this particular point in time, and you don't need to taste something in order to find that out. You don't need to touch anything. You have knowledge of what's going on inside of you, your thoughts, your willings, without resorting to anything in the physical world. You just don't need it, but you still can gain access to it. In fact, you can gain better access to it than the best doctor with the best brain science, whatever. He's still fumbling around, or she's still fumbling around, trying to figure out what to do with these chemical processes. Whereas you can say immediately what it is that you're thinking about, what it is that you're feeling. You may not be able to get it entirely. That doesn't mean that there's no mystery in this. Doesn't mean that it's not a big reality that wouldn't take a lot of time to sort of really get at. But there are some immediate things that you can know, and you don't need your five senses to do it. It just means that you, these aspects of you, are not physical. And notice here finally on this, a sentence here where he says, he is of course referring to the realm of persons and to God above all. That's why when Dallas is talking about spiritual, he's talking about the personal, okay? There really isn't any difference between those terms for him. There is no spiritual reality that is not personal reality. Maybe you could give the case of angels, and I'm not going to go into that, but possibly you could say angels aren't persons, but they are still spiritual. But that would maybe be the only exception that we can think of here, okay? Spiritual reality, personal reality. When we talk about God as spirit, we're talking about God as a person. Next thing, power. And for Dallas Willard here, he says, the spirit is a form of energy, for it does work, and whatever does work has power. It's a very subtle but clear. Can you be subtle and clear statement about what we count as energy and what we count as non-energy. So does work, that just means that the spiritual aspect of you can move things. It can cause, it has effects. It affects your thoughts, it affects your feelings, and through your connection to your body, it can affect things in your body. It can affect other people through words or maybe through your body or anything like that. It actually changes things. It does work. And that's the basic sort of big general understanding of what energy is or what power would be. Physical energy is similar. It also has the capacity to do work, to move things. But obviously the spiritual, the personal, is going to move things, do work in a different way. And really what he's going to get to is that in the biblical view, it, that is spirit, is the ultimate form of power on which all other forms rest. So physical energy is dependent on spiritual energy, spiritual power. God lies at the back of all of it, okay? Personal lies at the back of everything. All right. By the way, I should just say here, if you do philosophy and that sort of thing, personalism is the word here. This is where a couple things come together for Dallas in philosophy, and one is personalism, another is phenomenology. And so a lot of these things are just things you get out of Edmund Husserl and his early followers, who weren't really personalists, at least not in a strict sense. But there's just a lot of groups, in fact, just the Christian tradition, and people such as Thomas Reid, who was a Christian, would have no trouble with this sort of thing that Dallas Willard is doing. Okay, third thing, thought. Now, what he has to say about thought is well, I mean, it's interesting to me because he has so much to say about it in his philosophy. He talks about persons and their experiences are consciously directed upon various subject matters that concern them. Persons think and their thoughts pick out or select specific objects, past, present, and future. So that idea of picking out, let me give you a word, intentionality. That is a big word that Dallas is going to talk a lot about in his philosophy. He's not using it here, but he's talking about the reality of it here, that we describe our minds through intentionality. This idea of consciously directing our minds upon particular things. Yeah, just try to help you out with that. You can see here, if you have read his book Renovation of the Heart, that we're starting to do some of that stuff. So Renovation of the Heart, he breaks down the human being into 6 dimensions. He doesn't want to call them parts and that. So 6 dimensions. Well, mind and feeling he puts together. So maybe there's only 5, but thought and feeling he puts together. So maybe there's only 5. So the mind comprising of thought and feeling, and then he has the will, and then he has the social dimension, the body, and the soul. So that's 5 or 6, depending on how you divide it up. Dimensions, and here is the first one, thought. So here's the 4th thing he wants to say about persons and spirit, and that is valuing. Now, this doesn't sound like feeling, but it's interesting at this point in his life, he's kind of combining the two. He talks about valuing as being favorably disposed towards some things, and he calls it feeling, emotion, or valuation. Now, this fits with, this is another phenomenological thing. There's an old phenomenologist, Max Scheler, who did a lot on value and how value is a part of the spiritual nature of human beings. Lots to find out there, but it's interesting to me that he has lumped valuing and feeling together. The main thing, I guess, to get from there is that he does think that feeling in the sense of valuing can be objective. All right. So value theory, boy, I am just throwing terms at you today. Value theory is something that Dallas Willard has done for his entire life. He's doing a touch of it here. It's very important because it relates to how we do ethics. So in order to be able to say this is a good thing, this is a bad thing, you have to have some sense of how you're going to get to values, what's valuable, what's not valuable. So value theory is a big deal. Valuing is something that persons do. Rocks don't recognize value. They can't do it. And there are other things, I don't know, I'm pretty sure amoeba can't do valuing either. Okay, that's the 4th thing. Now, I want you to notice one little thing, and I would put a little break here in this paragraph. This is the second to last paragraph on valuing. The last sentence there, Dallas Willard says, that makes us capable of choosing, which is in italics, and acting with reference to them. This is our will, also in italics. This is a 5th thing, okay? So he has thought, he has valuing, he has now will. So 5 total for this whole section. Will, he's not going to tell you much about it right now because that is down in the next section, the centrality of will or heart. So take a little pen and draw, from that sentence about will and draw it down to the next whole section because that's where he's going to tell you about that. And now remember, he's still just trying to talk about what spirit is, and he's still doing it by looking at us, by looking at you, and mainly by looking at himself. But this is just how this kind of work works, okay? You're going to have to look at yourself and see if you can identify these things, identify your non-physical nature, identify that you have power, that you have an ability to do work with something in you that is not physical, that you have thoughts, that you have an ability to value things, and that you have will, which we'll talk about in the next video. Now, I have just dumped a whole lot of terms on you, and I hope that those of you who are interested in this will go and look it up for themselves. But get this as sort of the basic points. One is we're going to understand what it means that God is spirit by looking at us as spirit. And in order to make sense of you as spirit, you're going to have to not use your five senses. In fact, you do this all the time, all right? You don't have any trouble doing that. So look at who you are, what you are, and, you won't have to use your five senses because you will very easily identify your thoughts and your ability to value things, your ability to move things. That's you. That's what spirit is, and that's how Dallas is going to pretty soon start to talk about what God is. God is person, God is spirit. But more on that in our next video next time. Thanks for being here. Glad you showed up. If you made it all the way down here, like this, subscribe. I mean, you made it to the end of the video. You might as well subscribe. Sign up for our almost monthly newsletter at Sanctus Institute. Hear more about us. Bye.